In this lecture, we'll write an example program that involves file input and output. In the last lecture, we went over how we can write to files and how to read from files. So what we're going to do here is actually write an application that will allow us to write to files and read from files. It's one thing to show you how to do something and give some code examples. It's another to actually try it out yourself. So what I recommend here is to make sure you follow along with this lecture, because that's all we're going to be doing in this lecture. It's just one giant application example. But make sure you're following along. That way you have a better idea of how to actually interact with files in Visual Basic. So what we need to do here is create a new project. So I have Visual Studio open. I recommend you do so as well. And we're going to click on New Project. And here we're still going to use Visual Basic, Windows Forms Application. And I'm going to call this File Application. Give it a second to create. There we go. And in this application, we're not going to have any tools. We're not going to have any buttons or text boxes or radio buttons or anything like that. We're going to just do pure code in this case. So we're going to double click on the form to get into the code view. And since we're interacting with files, the first we need to do is make sure we import the system.io library. Otherwise, we're going to get some problems later on. So I'm just going to put it up here. I'm going to say imports and then system.io. That way we can use things like the stream writer and stream reader classes. Now what we're going to do first is writing to a file. So we need to decide what our file is. And what I'm going to do in this case is I'll create a string variable. I'm going to do dim fn1 for file name 1 as string. And I'm going to set it equal to test1.txt. Now initially this file does not exist. So what's going to happen is when I open this file to write, we're going to create the file. And since I'm not using the full path name, it's going to be in the same place as the executable. And I'll show you where this is in just a little bit. So we have our string for our file name. So now we need to create an object of our stream writer class. So we're going to do dim, and I'm going to call this SW. And we're going to say as stream writer. And we're going to set it equal to new stream writer. And we're going to pass the file name string as an argument. So we need to pass in fn1. Okay. So now SW is an object of the stream writer class. So what this is going to do is it'll open up test1.txt. And then if we invoke methods onto SW, that means that we are going to write to the file test1.txt. So we'll just make this a very simple example. So I'm going to do sw.writeLine, and then I'm going to put in here hello world. Why not? We'll do hello world. Okay. And then finally what we're going to do is, well, after we're done writing to the file, we need to make sure we close it. Because if we don't close it, then it's not going to work right for us. So I'm going to put in I'm going to do sw.close. And that should take care of our file writing. So let's go ahead and we'll run this. And you see there's nothing here. And that's intentional. There isn't going to be anything in this form because all we do is we create a file and write to it. There's no message that says we actually did it. So we'll go ahead and close this. So how do we know that this actually worked? Well, we need to find the file. So let's go into, let's use this folder. And I'm going to go back to the beginning here. Just that way I can show you where this is. So in this particular case, if you remember from earlier examples, we had a projects folder for Visual Studio. So we'll go there. So we're going to go to C. We're going to go down to users. Go to my user. I believe this is under my documents. Yeah, I guess I could have clicked on documents over here, but oh well. Visual Studio 2013. Projects. Here's our file application. And we need to go to where our executable is. And if you remember, that would be under file application. And then bin, and then debug. And sure enough, here is test1.txt. If I click on that, we see hello world. So there's our file that we wrote to. Okay. Now you might be wondering, how do I know that file wasn't already there? What if you're just tricking me? Okay. Well, let's do another one. Let's create another file that we'll write to, and we'll also have it write to this folder. And as you see, there aren't any other text files. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And then let's do another one. Let's create a new file. So we'll do dim, we'll call it fn2 as string, and we'll set it equal to test2.txt. And then we will create the stream writer object. Now we're going to use a different approach. So if you remember, we talked about the using block. So let's do that here. So if you remember, the way this works is we're going to start with using, and then we need to put in our resource. And notice that we're given the template format for this in Visual Studio, which is pretty convenient. So in this case, I'm going to use SW2, since we already have an SW, as, and this is going to be stream writer. And then we're going to set it equal to new stream writer, and we're going to pass fn2. I'll hit enter. And once again, Visual Studio adds in the end using line, so we don't have to worry about remembering to do that. And what's nice about the using block, I think we mentioned this in the other lecture, was that if we get out of the using block, it frees up the resource automatically. So for example, when I'm using this approach up here for creating an object of the streamwriter class, I have to call the close method. Here, I don't have to do that because when I get to end using, it'll take care of that for us. So this is a very convenient trick that we can use in our programs. So what we'll do is we'll do SW2 dot, and I'll use the write line method. If I can type, that'd be good. Write line. And let's put something else in here. So we're going to say, let's do this is a test. Okay. And that should take care of writing to the new file. And once again, I'm going to pull this up. There is no test2.txt. It's not there. So let's go ahead and run this. And nothing's going to be here. It makes sense. Once again, we didn't do anything with the actual form. So we'll close that. And then we will go back here. And what's this? Test2.txt. That wasn't there before. I didn't have anything up my sleeve. I didn't do a file switch. So if I open this up, there it is. This is the test. Is it magic? No, it's not magic. It wouldn't fool Penn and Teller if I try to do this. This is just a simple program where we create the file in order to write to it. Okay. So sure enough, we see that we can write to files. Nothing out of the ordinary there. So what about reading to files? Could I take one of these files and read something from it? Well, sure, we can do that. We talked about the stream reader class. So let's go and do that. So let's modify our program again. And this time, we are going to handle reading. Now, if you remember, what makes the stream reader class different from the stream writer class is we have to make sure the file exists first. So we can use the exist method from the file class in order to do that. So what we'll do is we'll start with an if-then statement. So we'll say if file.exists, and let's do the first file. So we'll do fn1. So if this file exists, then we'll do something. And in this case, we'll use another using block where we will create a stream reader object that will read something from the file. So we'll do using. I'm going to call this fw. We'll say as stream reader equals new stream reader, and then we'll use fn1. And then here we can modify, well, we're not going to modify anything, but we're going to read something from the file, and let's just display in a message box. So we can do message box, and for this I'm going to use fw dot, and we see we have several things we can use here, so there is a whole bunch of different methods. And I'm going to use the read to end. So we're just going to read the entire file, and we need some parentheses in here to make this work. And I think that's going to take care of everything. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So I'm going to click on start. And we see that we get the pop-up that says hello world, which should be the contents of fn1. So let's just, or test1.txt. So if I open this up, yeah, there's hello world right there. So what we did is we read that file. We click OK. And of course, there's not going to be anything else going on here, but we see that we actually opened up the first file for reading purposes, and then we displayed whatever was in the file, which was hello world in this case. But yeah, I mean, that's some pretty basic examples. You can play around with this a little bit more if you like. You can add more files. We can do appending. In fact, let's just go ahead and do appending just for fun here. So let me double check a couple things. So we'll just go ahead and do that. Why not? Let's append to like the second file, for example here. So let's take a look at how we would do that. So remember, we can use the append text from the file class in order to do that. So let's do dim, and we'll say fw2. Why not? Or we'll do actually just w3. It really doesn't matter. We can call it whatever we want. We'll say as stream writer, and we'll say equals file dot append text. Now let's do fn2. And let's see what happens here. So we do sw3 dot write line. Now let's just say another test. So we're just going to try this out. So what this should do is our let's see here, our file test2.txt should have the line, this is a test on the first line. And if this works correctly, we should get another test in the second line. Now, just to be safe, I do need to include the close here. So we need to do sw3.close. There we go. Let's see what happens. So click start. Hello world. Okay. And there's that. All right, so let's go into test2.txt and see what happens. This is another test, and there you go. We appended another test at the end of the file. So here we were able to read from a file or write to a file. So we did it up here, and then we showed how we can do it using the using block. We then showed how we can read from a file and do something with it, such as displaying it, and then we see that we can append to a file. So that's the basics of working with files.